Welcome back. All right, we are going to be working with a poem from my librarian, Mrs. Long, by Nikki Giovanni today. Masterpiece of a poem. We got Nikki Giovanni's TED Talk. If we have time at the end of class, and we also have an interview with James Baldwin, we wouldn't have time for that whole thing, but we'd have time for some if we're lucky. But let's start by looking at this poem together. So take a look. Essential question: how do we build knowledge through reading? Let's highlight that essential question. You click the highlighter down here. This is the thickness of the highlighter. That seems pretty good. All right, I'm going to put it on yellow, or like mustard yellow. How do we build knowledge through reading? All right, let's highlight that question. Now, is there anything related to that essential question in this word cloud that corresponds with the poem by Nikki Giovanni? Well, I see the word library, so I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to keep looking. Do you see anything that we could highlight that might help answer the question, how we build knowledge? I see streets. I mean, that you have to build a street, sort of. Right? I see paperback, bookstore. Do you see anything else that might help us? Take a moment right now and go ahead and highlight some of the other parts of this word cloud that might help to answer that essential question. Go ahead and do that now. All right. Hopefully you had a good word cloud highlighting session. On to slide 3, please. So the guiding prompt for this is: reading can become a very personal and meaningful activity. Examine how the speaker's feelings about reading in the poem. So it says exists. We should get rid of that word how. Examine the speaker's feelings about reading in a poem from my librarian, Mrs. Long. Use evidence from the text to support your answer. Take a moment, and I'd like you to choose the 2 most important words in that prompt and move those 2 red dots to them. Those 2 red dots are right here. See? Oh, there's Nikki Giovanni right there. And there's presumably the girl who is troubled that might need a book, right? You're going to move them over here to the 2 most important words. Go ahead and take the time to do that now. Nice work. So as we go through this poem, I'm going to have someone else read it with a better reading voice than mine. And as we go through, the only thing that we're going to do is we're going to wonder, right? We've been going over our T-chart in class. We have been noticing noticing things, but we're going to put our brain on wonder here, and we're going to use just this purple question mark to do it. So this question mark are things that we wonder about, right? So for instance, who is Mrs. Long? Is she the librarian? Right? Most likely the sentence seems to do it. Why is the girl troubled? I wonder why, what's giving her trouble? Is it just that she's bored? Right? So as we go through the poem, we'll occasionally stop and think, what are we wondering about? All right, let's get the poem cooking.
Setting a purpose. In the poem, Nikki Giovanni looks back at her childhood and the people who most influenced her. As you read, think about how Giovanni's childhood experiences shaped her dreams and her writing. At a time when there was...
As this poem goes, please make sure that you're lining up your wandering question mark with each line in each stanza. All right, that way I can know you're following along. I want you to go along just right along with the screen. All right, please keep track. Please keep up. You can do it.
At a time when there was no TV before 3 p.m., and on Sunday none until 5, we sat on front porches watching the JFG sign go on and off, greeting the neighbors, discussing the political situation, congratulating the preacher on his sermon. There was always radio, which brought us songs from WLAC in Nashville and what we would now call easy listening or smooth jazz. But when I listened late at night with my portable that I was so proud of tucked under my pillow, I heard Nat King Cole and Matt Dennis, June Christie and Ella Fitzgerald, and sometimes Sarah Vaughan singing Black Coffee, which I now drink. It was just called music.
Let's pause there, and I'd like you to take a moment to drag your question mark to a part that you wonder about, and then we'll also write on our chart what it is we're wondering. Take a moment to do that now. Excellent work.
There was a bookstore uptown on Gay Street, which I visited and inhaled that wonderful odor of new books. Even today, I read hardcover as a preference, paperback only as a last resort. And up on the hill on Vine Street, the main black corridor, sat our Carnegie Library. Mrs. Long always glad to see you, the stereoscope always ready to show you faraway places to dream about. Mrs. Long asking, "What are you looking for today?" When I wanted Leaves of Grass or Alfred North Whitehead, she would go to the big library uptown, and I now know, hat in hand, to ask to borrow so that I might borrow. Probably they said something.
So take a moment, please, on slide 9, and let's take another moment to pause and work together to figure out something we might wonder about. Take a moment to do that now. All right. Excellent work.
Hand, to ask to borrow so that I might borrow. Probably they said something humiliating, since Southern whites like to humiliate Southern blacks. But she nonetheless brought the books back, and I held them to my chest, close to my heart, and happily skipped back to grandmother's house, where I would sit on the front porch in a gray glider and dream of a world far away. I loved the world where I was. I was safe and warm, and grandmother gave me neck kisses when I was on my way to bed. But there was a world somewhere out there, and Mrs. Long opened that wardrobe, but no lions or witches scared me. I went through knowing there would be spring.
The end of the poem. Now, that's not quite the end of what we're doing right now. Let's take a moment and we're going to wonder again using these last two really important stanzas. What's something that you wonder? Drag your question mark there and then write it down on your T chart. Please do that now. Excellent work. So now we got to take the time to think how we might answer this in writing. We're just going to do a quick pre-writing together. Okay. So it's asking us to examine the speaker's feelings about reading. Well, what are her feelings about reading? What are her feelings about reading? We've had a chance. Now we need to think. All right. What are some of her feelings about reading? We're going to go ahead and write those feelings up here. Right. One thing is that it's comforting. Another thing is that she feels empowered by it. These are feelings that help her to feel smarter than maybe those Southern blacks who would try to humiliate her, right? Safe. She associates it with her grandmother, right? So if we had to take some time to write a whole essay about this, and we're not going to, we could write a whole body paragraph about a part that seems to be giving her comfort, right? So you might put comforting for one body paragraph. You might put empowering for another. Ooh, empowering. And over here, safe. And maybe that's not the best one. Maybe you might want to go back later. And then each of those would get its own quote from the poem. So you'd have to go back and find a quote to match it. right? So we would have our topic sentences, one about each of these three feelings, right, that she has with reading, and then we would have a quote. Me, I'm just going to put a quote here, right? Poem. I'm going to copy and paste it. I'm going to put it here and here, right? And then we would kind of say the same thing for our conclusion. Oops. Just going to copy and paste this. I'm going to copy and paste it right down here. All right. Now, we're not taking the time to write a full TDA this week for Module 0, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of an outline of what it looks like so you could toggle over here and say, all right, I might have to write an essay eventually about this. The prompt would be over here, and then my TDA would be over there, right? We just want to get used to doing that. Many of these will write by hand. Excellent work. Good paying attention. Way to be, y'all.